Hello, this is Mr. Roselle, and right now I'm going to show you how to start your binary friendship bracelet. At this point in time, you should have already chosen your word, converted each of those letters of your word into their ASCII values, and then used your flippy-do to change each of these decimal numbers into their equivalent binary. These numbers here are going to be the pattern that you are going to follow as you are going to make your bracelet. You should have already chosen two colors to use. I have chosen red and orange, and assigned each of those colors a number, either 0 or 1. That's what is going to be used for the pattern here. Because my word is 6 letters long, I'm going to be doing 2 knots for each 0 and 2 knots for each 1. If your word is shorter than 6 letters, if it is between 3 and 5 letters, you'll actually increase this to 3 knots or 4 knots for each. For a longer word from 6 to 8, you'll do 2 knots for each. That'll make sure that the bracelet is wrist sized, but if you want to do a little bit larger or smaller, you can use the number of knots to do that. After you have gotten your string, you'll get 2 strings of one color and 2 strings of your other color. They'll be tied together in a knot like this with a little bit of space at the top, which we'll need to use for the ends. You're going to take your piece of tape. You're going to tape this down to your disc right where that knot is. That will provide a little bit of tension, which you'll need when you are tying your knots up. I have chosen to use red for 0, and that is my very first number. I have a 0. So I need to select just one of the red. It does not matter which of the 2 you use. You have multiple so that the string is a little bit, or the bracelet will be a little bit thicker in the end. Otherwise, it'll be a very thin bracelet. After you separate out one of those, I separate out one of my red strings, you're going to make a letter D. So I made a letter D using this. This string is over top of the other strings. What you're going to do is you're going to take the end of that, and you're going to thread this underneath and inside the letter D, and pull that through. That is going to create a loop around the center strings that goes through this. When you pull this tight and upwards, it's going to move up towards here. This is where you're going to need to be a little bit slow and careful, especially as you're doing this, if you're doing this for the first time, because you want this knot to be right behind the previous knots. And you tie that tight. Doesn't need to be too tight, but you want to be tight enough that it's not going to get loose. So I've done that one time. So I've done one of my 2 knots for the first number 0. I need to do one more knot. And take the same red string, make another letter D, take the end of the string, put it underneath the center strands through this hole, and keep going. What I'm doing with this hand here is I'm holding down these strings so that it's easier to pull this up. Otherwise, this could get bunched up in between and cause a little bit of a mess. This one I'm just gently pulling up until I can slide this knot up far enough that I can't see that little orange knot in between, because I want to be right behind the previous knot. Push it up there a little bit. All right, that's my first 2 red knots. I am done with this number 0. I'm going to move on to the first number 1. What you can do is you can cross off the number 0 if you would like, and that way you can keep track of which ones you have done, or you can refer to them here. It's going to be a little bit more important as you get into the center here, where it's going to be harder to tell where you are. All right, we have finished that number 0. We're going to move on to the first number 1. Number 1s are going to be orange, so I'm done with this red string. I'm going to put it back into the stack here. And I'm going to select one of my orange ones. I've chosen this one. Make the letter D. Find the end of it, put it underneath, pull this through, hold down my center string so they don't get bunched up, and bring this all the way up to the top, and tighten that down. It's my first knot for my first number one, and do another one. Slide this underneath, pull this through, slide this up, and tighten it up so it's just behind the last knot I tied. I've done that first number one. I'm just going to stick with the same string since it's the correct color to do the next two number ones. This will be 4 more knots in total, 2 for each of those number ones. All right, there we go. There are all of the knots for all of these ones. There should be 6 knots there in total, 2 each for each of these ones. Next, I'm going to switch over to red, and you're just going to continue through this pattern just like this, going over through each of these until you get to the very last one. When you have finished your very last digit, that is when you're going to stop, and we are going to deal with these ends. That is going to be a separate video.